What's up, everybody? This is Dave here with Comics Games Life, and today's story comes out of Absolute Superman, issue number 2. And it begins with a young Superman in his room on Krypton, where he appears to be doing some online schooling, and his teacher is grilling him about a report that he handed in, saying that he was confused because the descriptions that he gave in the report seem a little bit too in detail, and he asked him if he got the information out of the cleric's lunarium. And then Kal-El lazily just responds with, "No, I wrote it." And that's when the teacher gets upset because it seems like the school assignments that they wanted the students to complete were just a list of facts that had already been approved by the Science League, and the purpose of this assignment, as well as many most likely, is just to reinforce what the Science League wants to push out to the young minds on Krypton. But Kal-El is just like his parents. He's a bit of a rebel and sees the world not just with his eyes and mind, but also with his heart. So we're getting the obvious feeling that Krypton is definitely dystopian, like how we learned in issue number 1, where there's a hierarchy within the society, and dependent upon your place in that hierarchy determines how you're treated in the society. Now, while Kal-El didn't like how that ruled on Krypton, he especially doesn't like it here on Earth. And that brings us back to where we left off in issue number 1, where him being handcuffed to Lois Lane, who's a member of a tactical unit that investigates paranormal and supernatural phenomenon that answers to a totalitarian company called the Lazarus Corporation. And at this point in time, she has a gun pointing at his face, and she's yelling at him to get on his knees. But Superman has an AI program named Sol that's embedded into his suit, and he's in constant communication with it. And right now, Sol is telling Superman that he's got to get out of here. So Superman tries breaking the cuffs, but to no avail, which prompts Lois to shoot Superman in the face, and Sol tells him that he is weakened. So again, he's got to get out of here. Don't worry about the cuffs. I'll take care of the cuffs. So Sol then releases some lava-like Kryptonian technology to try and take off the cuffs. And Superman tells Sol, just don't hurt the girl. But honestly, Lois Lane is the least of his problems right now, because there's an entire platoon of Lazarus Corporation peacemakers, all with their weapons pointing at Superman. And with the action that Sol's doing on the cuffs, it looks kind of like they might be hurting Lois Lane. So this incites the peacemakers to just open fire. And the way that they're shooting, if Superman didn't jump in the way, they were guaranteed to turn Lois Lane into a bullet sponge. So this is the cool part. This is where we actually get to see Superman's cape. Because unlike the traditional Superman, where his cape is made from Kryptonian fibers that's way stronger than normal materials found here on Earth, this absolute Superman's cape is made out of red sunstone dust. And it does way more than just flap in the wind. Because as we can see, it's acting as a shield and covering Lois Lane and Superman while they're under this barrage of gunfire. But the funny thing is, while Superman is obviously saving Lois Lane's life, she decides to shoot him in the face again, which he snaps at her. "Will you stop doing that?" And she says, "Oh, now you're talking to me." So then Superman tells Sol to use the red dust to hold on to Lois Lane, and then he begins to smile about what he's going to say next. And he continues to tell Sol, just make sure what we're about to do doesn't rip her in half, which makes Lois Lane freak out a little bit. And then they both launch into the sky, but only to be brought down by some Lazarus heat-seeking missiles. So at this point, Lazarus can care less if they kill Lois Lane or not. They just want to take down Superman. Now, this doesn't take him out, but it does knock him down. And as they crash land into a different part of the slums, Lois Lane is temporarily unconscious, but as Superman picks her up and begins to walk off, well, don't you know it, she shoots him in the face again. And Superman's just about had it because he saved her life numerous times in this past few minutes. And yet she still tries to shoot him and take him into custody. And that's when they get into an argument because she's telling him that with his powers and all that he's displayed, he's a potential threat to those around him. And he scoffs at the accusation because it's not like Lazarus Corporation cares about anybody. And then he tells Lois Lane that those people you think I'm endangering, they're just livestock to people like you. And she snaps back, saying, "You don't know anything about me, sunshine." And that's when Kal-El breaks it down. He calls her ignorant, that she only cares about herself, and she thinks that she's smarter than everyone else around her. And then he tells her, "You're exactly what's wrong with your planet." And with that last phrase being said, that's when Sol jumps in, and he tells Kal-El to stop talking. Stop what you're saying right now. So that's when Lois Lane picks up what Superman put down and asks the question, "My planet?" But before they can get into it any further, the Lazarus Corporation has found them. So that's when Kal-El tells everyone who's around to get off the streets and to run indoors. And then he effortlessly picks up a car and chucks it at a Lazarus Corporation helicopter. And which of course he nails it, but that helicopter slams directly into a church that some of those people had run into when he gave him the warning to get off the streets. And despite his and Lois's differences, they're both on the same page when it comes to rescuing those people inside. So seeing as how they're still attached, Superman has no choice but to take her with him. But fortunately, he has the red sunstone dust to protect Lois, but not just her. As he moves with a quickness, saving men, women, and children, this sunstone conforms to all their bodies, which protects them from the flames. And it not only protects them, but actually helps carry them out of the building. Now, this is a super cool concept for Absolute Superman's cape. It has this intelligent elemental capability to it that he's able to use and to wield for his own protection as well as any others who might be around him. And it really reminds me of Spawn's cape from Image Comics, where his cape was almost like another character into itself, where it actually cared for him and had its own self-defense mechanisms to protect Al Simmons, who is the character Spawn. But now that he's brought everybody out, we get to see another characteristic of his cape because it not only protects people and is able to lift them up, but it's also able to apply medical aid as he applies the dust to their wounds and their burns. So in classic fashion, wherever there's fire, Superman likes to make it snow, and he uses his freeze breath to extinguish all the flames of the burning building. And now at this point, he is drained because he was already weakened before. And now to add this recent endeavor onto his plate, he's pretty much ripe for the picking. But despite the fact that Lois Lane had tried to apprehend him several times since their encounter, when he's at his weakest, she's starting to have second thoughts because as she had no choice but to go into the fire with Superman and saving all those people, she low-key started to catch feelings for him. And there are things about Superman that she can't help but see, like his nature to want to help people. And even though he has these supernatural abilities, he seems like a lost and confused child. And then of course there's the physical things that she noticed, more specifically on the way he smelled, because apparently Superman smells like oak barrels filled with burgundy wine stored for 1,000 years in a musty basement, which in her words smells amazing. So now Superman starts to get up and slowly recover, and you can even see his suit regenerating, and he meekly tells Lois thank you. And then she begins to fumble over words because she doesn't really know what to say, but eventually tells him that you're welcome. Now Lois isn't the only one feeling a certain way after this interaction, because Superman breaks off into a tangent that doesn't really make sense given what's going on in the current moment. Now I'm assuming this is coming from a place of loneliness, because during this time with Lois Lane, it seems like he also has developed some sort of connection with her as well, because he starts talking about that there's a place here in the middle of the Arctic Ocean called Svalbard where the sun can shine for days and there are more polar bears than there are people, but at nighttime you can see all the stars in the sky. Now it's really interesting that he mentions this because the new James Gunn Superman movie, some of it is actually filmed in Svalbard. So it seems that it may be possible that the Fortress of Solitude in the Absolute Universe will be in this location. I'm assuming that's what they're hinting at, and as well as in the new DC Universe that James Gunn is creating. And he continues to ramble on, saying that he's from one of these stars in the sky, and you don't know how lucky you are to have this planet. And Lois is starting to get confused because she doesn't know exactly where this is headed. But then just as Superman starts to name the planet where he's from, Sol finally gets the handcuffs undone, and Superman wastes no time and flies out of there, leaving Lois in his dust. Now back at, I'm assuming, HQ, Lois is giving her report, but the way she does it is kind of odd because she pretty much talks to the computer. And it's because the Lazarus Corporation has this AI program called Brainiac. Now, to them, it's just a computer program. But of course, to us, the audience, we know that Brainiac is a major villain in the DC universe. So she's trying to explain what happened, and no matter what she says about Superman not being a threat, but rather something or someone they need to investigate more, the Brainiac program quickly pushes aside anything she says, declares him a threat, which frustrates her to no end. Not because it decides to write the report for her. In fact, this Lois Lane hates writing reports, but mainly because it's twisting her words and taking her way out of context. So even though she hates writing reports, she takes a breath, buckles down, and begins to report about the situation in her own words. Now, before we get to the end scene, we can see the similarities between this part as well as the part in the very beginning when Kal-El was getting scolded by his instructors about how he was using his own words to write his report and not getting this already laid out script for him to just copy and paste, which in turn parallels Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the Prime universe, where they're actually reporters and they get paid to use their own words to make reports and report the news all the time. The only difference is that here they get paid and there they get punished. And so finally, in the closing sequence of this issue, we are back on Krypton, and we see that Superman's parents are working on something. And that something is actually the redesign of a prototype that Superman's mom had done when she was 12 years old, which is of a suit that's been created for space exploration, as well as being its own rocket ship that's powered by red sunstone. And they're actually confident about this redesign and feel if they're given enough resources and time, this could be used to save their people. So as we saw in issue number 1, Krypton isn't doing so well, and their planet is starting to break down. So they have a plan B. Because if the world leaders don't believe them and don't take this planetary threat seriously, then they're just going to gather the resources on their own in secret and take their closest friends and family and fly off the planet to save themselves. Well, that is the end of Absolute Superman issue number 2. So we learned a lot about his suit, how it was designed, and its capabilities, as well as the beginning of Kal-El and Lois Lane's possible romantic relationship. Now, I'm hoping in issue number 3, we find a bit more about Superman's history and where his parents may be. So I thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for your support, your comments, sharing, all that cool stuff. So I just want to say, continue supporting your local comic and game shops, and I will see you guys next time.